On behalf of the Jesuit School Network's Conference Office, welcome to our latest Virtual Ignatian Inquiry Session. As you know, the JSN seeks to be a supportive resource to our member schools, and this virtual session is really designed to be just that, a carved out space to listen, to learn, and to engage with one another. We're eager to encourage a spirit of inquiry across the many layers of our work in Jesuit education, and we envision our particular brand of inquiry to be the art of inquiry as seen through our Ignatian lens, asking questions and exploring issues that matter in our schools through the frame of our shared Jesuit mission. For those that I do not know, I am Kristin Cully, Director of Inquiry and New Ventures for the JSN Conference Office. And I'd like to thank my colleague, Kristin Smith, who's on the call here, who leads all things communications for us at the JSN. And she will help us to enjoy a smooth afternoon together this afternoon, or smooth hour together this afternoon. Let's begin, as we always do, with an opening prayer. If we can quiet ourselves in the middle of our days, various parts of the network, various time zones, international as well, be reminded that in being together today, we are in the presence of God. So in the name of the Father and Son and Holy Spirit. And let us pray especially this afternoon for all of those that are struggling in our world. I'd like to have as our prayer today a beautiful poem I came across called Old Maps No Longer Work. It was recently shared by Parker Palmer, and I know so many of us are fans of his work, and it's by Joyce Rupp. I think it's very fitting for today. I keep pulling it out, the old map of my inner path. I squint closely at it, trying to see some hidden road that maybe I've missed. But there's nothing there now except some well-traveled paths. They have been my footsteps often, hold my laughter, caught my tears. I keep going over the old map, but now the roads lead nowhere, a meaningless wilderness where life is dull and futile. Toss away the old map, she says. You must be kidding, I reply. She looks at me with Sarah eyes and repeats, toss it away. It's of no use where you are going. I have to have a map, I cry. Even if it takes me nowhere, I can't be without direction. But you are without direction, she says. So why not let go and be free? So here I am, tossing away the old map. Sadly, fearfully, putting it behind me. Whatever will I do? Wails my security. Trust me, says my midlife soul. No map, no specific directions. No this way ahead or take a left. How will I know where to go? How will I find my way with no map? But then my midlife soul whispers, there was a time before maps when pilgrims traveled by the stars. It is time for the pilgrim in me to travel in the dark, to learn to read the stars that shine in my soul. I will walk deeper into the dark of my night. I will wait for the stars, trust their guidance, and let their life be enough for me. Let us pray for the grace of imagination, of dreaming together and creating, for the inspiration to put our old maps away, for the courage to see when a new map is needed, for the energy to do this together in our communities, and the enthusiasm to find joy in our work. Amen. And we did have in the chat window there that prayer, if you might be of interest in that poem. So let's dive into our topic this afternoon, deepening the global dimensions of Jesuit schools. What does being a globally minded school actually mean? Is it that the school offers opportunities for travel and service? Or are we invited to see and to be more? What do global engagement, networking, and collaboration imply for students and colleagues in our schools? And how can slight shifts in the culture of our schools and collaboration among programs and offerings in our schools help form students who will be prepared for this present day world they will be stepping into? Can all of this be grounded in mission and core Ignatian Jesuit teachings? We hope this afternoon to share new innovative programming from the JSN that responds to these invitations and questions posed. This conversation will be of interest to school leadership and faculty and staff, and I'm thrilled to see so many folks on this call, and we will share it virtually as well, the recording of the session where we hope to reach even more. So many people who are called to support globally minded learning and collaborative networking in Jesuit schools across our network. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this afternoon. My colleague, Catharine Steffens, serves as Director of Global Partnership and Initiatives for the Jesuit Schools Network. She's also the Assistant for Global Initiatives for the Society of Jesus, Secretariat of Secondary and Pre-Secondary in Rome. She began teaching in Madrid, Spain in 1981 and has been in education since then, teaching at all grades and levels, both private and public, from Montessori preschool to elementary, middle, high school, college workshops, and with adults. Her commitment and passion for Ignatian pedagogy began with the 8 years she taught at Brophy College Preparatory School in Phoenix, Arizona, followed by 3 years at Georgetown Prep in Bethesda, before coming to work for the JSN and the Society of Jesus Secretariat of Education. Catharine earned a Master of Arts degree in Spanish language and literature from Arizona State University, a K-12 multiple subject bilingual teaching certificate with cross-cultural emphasis from California State University, Long Beach, and a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish from the University of Southern California. She is the editor of our global publication Hemispheres and has published articles and presented at conferences in both the United States and Spain. Catharine lives in the DC area and has 3 adult children who share her desire to know the world. And after completing their own university studies in the United States and abroad, live now in Alaska, New York, and Maryland. Catharine is of Greek American heritage, and throughout her life, she has lived and worked in various parts of the US and abroad. She is bilingual in English and Spanish. So it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Catharine, who will take it from here.
Thank you very much, Kristin. And I am going to start right in with sharing my screen. There we are. So hello and welcome to everyone. It's very exciting to see you all here, and an honor and a pleasure to be talking new global programming. To get us started, I wanted to set some context of why global. We begin with General Congregation 32, which defined the promotion of justice as an absolute in the service of faith. Right from the beginning, we see the promotion of justice as integral with global. The Society of Jesus in GC 35 then invited us to explore the potentialities of being and acting as a universal body with a universal mission. And GC 36 then deepened our focus on networking and collaboration as our contemporary way of proceeding, global collaboration for global challenges. These are all big invitations with complex responses, especially in very busy schools where everyone is full speed ahead with the day-to-day demands of a school. And this is where JSN has entered to accompany the schools. For the last 4 years or so, JSN has been working with a large group of dedicated and brilliant educators. Many of you are on this Zoom call, and it's very great to see you all, with educators from JSN and also beyond, to operationalize the global invitation set before us. We ground our responses in the reality, the experience, the experimentation, and the expertise of all of you in the schools. To use the words of Father Sosa, we are examining how to educate and train in a new way for a different future, making the impossible possible. The first JSN Global Working Group, in fact, was in March 2017 for the virtual pre-Congress of Jesuit Rio. Since then, we have held regular focused working gatherings of engaged and committed educators and leaders from JSN to develop programming that responds to the general congregations and also enters the work through the UAPs, the concrete guidelines of JSN's standards and benchmarks, including the recently revised Domain 5, the global identifiers of a living tradition, and the action plan from Jesuit Rio Congress in 2017. All of these elements are represented, intertwined, and integrated on the Holistic Perspective infographic, which can be found on Educate Magis and also on the JSN Global Perspectives page. And of course, we ground all our work in the Ignatian definition of a global citizen. To be effective, our work must be grounded in mission. And to do this, the foundational documents are essential. Today is to share new innovative programming from JSN, formed and informed by many of you, that responds to the context, challenges, and opportunities before us. There are 3 new initiatives that I'll talk about, along with the further development of hemispheres, and all of these can be found on the JSN Global Perspectives page. We began with spending time with the question, what does it mean to have a school-wide global dimension? What is global? And we created the Global Dimensions Inventory. This inventory is both formative in the scope of what is considered global and informative for discernment of where a school's strength and where there are opportunities for growth. Encompassing 8 categories, the GDI, Global Dimensions Inventory, was created through the input of all our network schools, including Nativity, Cristo Rey, and traditional schools. The inventory is an opportunity that brings together different departments in our schools in the recognition that developing a globally minded school involves more than particular courses or programs. The themes of the Ignatian Global Citizenship definition are interwoven into the very fabric of who we are. The second new initiative to share is the Ignatian Global Scholar Certificate Program. And I'll explain this initiative in the most depth. And to do that, I am going to use a beautiful presentation made by Cora Antonio of Bellarmine College Prep in San Jose, California. This borrowing is intentional as something we have learned to do in this complicated work in the midst of very, very busy schedules. We are becoming quite expert at sharing our work and using the work of others. It is not necessary to recreate the wheel over and over when incredibly talented people are surrounding us in our network. We can support and collaborate with each other. The Ignatian Global Scholars begins with the global citizenship definition. That's where we start. It opens opportunities for students to engage in existing and ongoing experiences already present in your schools. Students complete 7 of 9 components from each of 5 of the IPP categories. In curriculum, they choose 4 courses already present that have a global dimension. 3 years minimum of language study. In experiences, 2 global events each year. Intercultural experiences that form and foster relationships. We see transformation as coming through encounter and also in experiences active co-curricular involvement that also has a very deep focus and depth. Reflection. This is really where we see the transformation occur. Through the Ignatian reflection process, we see students look back, reflect, and then grow with all the programming that they're doing. The IGS framework includes reflection timelines and framing and prompts. In action, there's service, again, with the goal of forming and building relationships. And again, service that is present now in your schools. And a culminating project with a global focus that is shared with the community. Evaluation. And in completing all pieces successfully, the student earns a JSN Ignatian Global Scholar Certificate. We see this program as a formative opportunity for students with a passion for their communities and the world to excel and shine. Within each school, a faculty, staff, advisor, or advisors review and monitor progress. They identify colleagues to assist, specify program requirements that are present in their school, facilitate recruitment and accompany the students. They collaborate with the IGS team and facilitate collaboration among the students. So far, this programming sounds amazing, we hope. And so we turn then to the question of how can we take this even one step further, continuing and enhancing the many good things that all of you are all doing, while at the same time making connections across the school for an integrated, strategic, global way of proceeding. Our new Ignatian Global Engagement Mentor Program, iGEM, was developed for that purpose. The iGEM program offers the opportunity to turn inward and reflect on what our individual school is doing well and where there are opportunities for growth. iGEM begins with Jesus at the center. The first look is through the eyes of Jesus, a meditation that invites contemplation on where Christ feels welcomed and at home in your school. And by extension, where do others feel welcomed and at home? From there, the mentor and mentee begin a process of conversations that lead the mentee school to defining their strengths and identifying opportunities for growth. iGEM is a 2-year program. We've begun our first pilot this year. In this global work, we come to see ourselves as part of something greater. We are part of a global network. We are part of something bigger than our office, our classroom, school, province, state, country, or region. We are part of the Jesuit Global Network of Schools, and there are colleagues, resources, and opportunities in abundance, locally, in our own places of work, and globally. Before we turn to some JSN educators doing this work, I would like to make a quick note of our JSN Global Journal Hemispheres. Hemispheres is a monthly publication of resources from your fellow educators and our JSN partners. As with the Bellarmine slides from Cora on the Ignatian Global Scholars Program used today, via Hemispheres, we collaborate, borrow, share, and dialogue to streamline our work, to make it feel possible, and to spark action and ideas. Again, the wheel does not need to be recreated over and over. We work together in collaboration. So thank you. And I will now pass things over back to my colleague, Dr. Kristin Cully, who will introduce two of our very own expert educators who are implementing these programs in their schools. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Catherine. To introduce Salvatore Veniero, he serves as Director of Global Initiatives at St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City, New Jersey. Sal has been a member of the World Languages Department at Prep for 12 years, teaching German and Italian, and over the last 2 years, he took over direction of the Office of Global Initiatives. There, he is responsible for organizing all international exchange programs, providing curricular support on the inclusion of global citizenship, education throughout academic departments, and generally supporting the uniquely Ignatian global perspectives in all of PrEP's school programming. Sal.
Thanks so much for that introduction. So I'm really excited to talk to you today a little bit about the Ignatian Global Scholars Program and what that's looked like in our school. So I guess I think a good place to start would be to talk about how we started the program. And I think one of the first things to do is to look at the requirements for the Ignatian Global Scholar Certificate and to make inventory of what your school is already doing really well. And I know that our schools have so many excellent opportunities for students that are already there. And this just provides a framework for students to reflect on the experiences that they're having. That's a very flexible framework. And it's flexible for the students, and it's also flexible for the schools. And so for our experience, for example, we already have a 2-language requirement. And so we increased the language requirement a little bit because every student was already going to have that 3-year language study. And we made it a 2-language requirement, for example, just because for our context, those students that we would identify as kind of shining in global citizenship would have more than 1 language under their belt. And so that may look different at different schools, but it's really nice that you have that flexibility. And then identifying which courses would fall under to fulfill that curriculum requirement, identifying what service programs your school is offering that would fulfill the action piece. All of those things are things that you already have and can kind of help students go through those experiences. And as I said, just kind of reflect on how does this make me a citizen of the world? And in what ways does this connect to the Ignatian education I'm receiving? I would say after you do that, the next step would be to kind of identify the key decision makers in your school. And I was really lucky. I think Jim D'Angelo is on this phone call at the moment, and he was my principal at the time and was really supportive of this program. And so making sure that the leadership of your school backs up what you're doing is really important to get them invested, get them involved in this conversation. You'll probably have to present this to the academic council or however that's organized, the department heads in your school, for feedback at some point to see what it is that they think of your description of which classes would fulfill these requirements and things like that. And then for final approval as well. I think it also really makes sense to bring guidance and college counseling into this conversation, because as much as, I mean, I think that we want kids to do this because it's a great experience and, Cura Personalis, developing these young individuals to be global citizens is the main goal. But of course, I think a selling feature is that this certificate is something that looks really nice on their resumes when they go to apply to college. And being in touch with the guidance department, I think, can help us sell that to students and also, raise awareness, which I think is just the next piece of this, is making sure kids know that this opportunity is available to them. If it's a new program, right, something that you haven't done at your school before, we just need to do some advertising. The benefits of bringing this into our school were immense, I have to say. It was small in our first year. We had 3 Ignatian Global Scholars graduate from prep as like a pilot project last year. But the work that they did was just incredible. And following their own passions, one student did a river cleanup project as his kind of culminating project at the end with that kind of focus on care for the common home. Another student in a similar direction did a project that was focused on renewable energy that he then presented to one of the younger classes in environmental science. And then the third student did amazing work kind of finding women-owned businesses in this primarily Spanish-speaking neighborhood in Union City and helping them apply for public funding for their businesses to ensure their success. And it was just, like I said, incredible to kind of follow them on their journeys and guide them. I will say that, as Catherine pointed out, you need to identify someone who can advise these students in this process. And finding the time to do that and doing that well is a learning process, but is something that, as I said, is just incredibly rewarding. And so highly recommend. I think that might be all I have to say at this point. And I think later there'll be some opportunities for questions.
Thank you so much, Sal. And we'll transition now to our second expert educator from the JSN, Pete Musso. Pete serves as the assistant principal for curriculum and instruction at Smet Jesuit in St. Louis. He teaches 1 session of English and is the moderator of the mountain bike club. So no mountains, but lots of biking, which I love. Smet Jesuit is a participant school in the pilot of the JSN Ignatian Global Scholars certificate program, and Pete is a mentor in the JSN Ignatian Global Engagement Mentors program. Pete just had an article published by Educate Magis, a trauma-informed teaching and learning framework for building relationships with the IPP, so be sure to check that out. Pete.
Just figured out how to unmute myself. I think Kristin earlier introduced me as an expert. An expert, I am not. So I'm setting the bar very low. One of the things that, one of the images that I'm coming into this conversation with is this image of the old maps no longer work. I'm not sure that's entirely true, but when I thought about that and when I was praying about that, I substituted the word maps with models or habits. And I think that kind of works for me. What are the old models or what are the old habits? And then what are we trying that's innovative and that's new? So as Kristin mentioned, I'm working with the Ignatian Global Engagement Mentors program. And before I get started, and I'm not going to be too long, I want to invite you to think about 2 questions. And hopefully your responses to these questions will allow you to experience what I'm going to have to say a little bit more deeply. So I would imagine that each of you work or have worked at a school or with schools. What does it look like to be in companionship with and for another school?
Wow.
Maybe it's a school in your neighborhood, or maybe it's a school far, far away. What does it look like to be in companionship for and with another school? So iGEM is this framework, and then I use the word framework loosely, I guess, but it's a framework for being in companionship. And it's really pretty simple. It includes a mentor school and a mentee school engaged in global mindedness work. I personally am working as a mentor with 2 mentee schools, Jesuit College Preparatory of Dallas and Marquette U High School in Milwaukee. Ben Kirby and Katie Egan I'm working with as mentees. And the iGEM's Framework Foundation is essentially a series of conversations, as Catherine mentioned. She alluded to the first conversation that we have, which is one of the first conversations, which is a reflecting conversation. But essentially, this iGEM program is about having conversations. The conversations challenge us, as Catherine said, to keep God at the center. And so we might ask things of each other, like, where is the Spirit at work or at play in our schools? And the conversations not only lead to the mentee's self-reflection, but also explore context setting. They challenge us to use our experiences, and most importantly, they lead to action and evaluation. So to prepare for iGEM, a small group of mentors participated in a 2-day training program in Washington, D.C., which was a lot of fun. And now the program is up and running. The training in DC allowed us time to learn about, and most importantly, practiced being in these structured conversations with one another so that we could feel comfortable with the conversation frameworks when we started. So a little bit about my experience. So at Jesuit College Preparatory in Dallas, Ben Kirby and I just finished our reflecting conversation. And before that, we had an introductory conversation, so that's 2. And our next conversation is going to be a planning conversation where we will look at Jesuits' goals and plan a very manageable global peace in the school as a direct result of our conversations. At Marquette U High, we also finished a reflecting conversation, but in this case, we're going to have another reflecting conversation. And I anticipate that their school is going to be engaged in a much larger action piece. We'll see where our conversations lead. I just have a few final reflections, and then I'll throw it back to the group. I feel like, as somebody who's engaged in this process, the conversation frameworks that we have developed for the program, that we practiced in Washington and now are implementing, they're working. And there's a ton of people in this session who can probably maybe either confirm that or deny it. But I feel like they're working. I'm reminded that as I have these conversations with my 2 schools that I'm a mentor with, that the frameworks are just that, they're frameworks. And that I use them to guide the conversation, but they're also invitations to enter into more deeply our experiences. So the introductory conversations where we spent time creating community and listening and talking, those were really, really good. And we weren't used to doing that. We weren't used to setting time aside to actually get to know one another during a Zoom call. When I referenced the themes of the exercises, we used some of the language of the intents and themes. And the language is kind of jarring, but where it took us was really, really kind of wonderful. For example, in our introductory conversations, we referenced the meditation on the incarnation. And when I said that, I kind of scratched my head, and the other people were kind of scratching their head like, where do we go with this? But we imagined the diversity of the 3 persons of the Holy Trinity. And we imagined where our schools welcomed Christ, and maybe in our schools, where are the places where Christ is not welcomed? So these types of conversations and this language really stretches our thinking. A common response from both schools in different conversations was that God is found in relationships. Coincidentally, what we're doing in iGEM is building relationships with one another. We're practicing so that we can continue to model this type of behavior in our schools for colleagues and students. Building relationships is networking, and it's global. One final reflection. Both of the schools I'm working with have very different end game action items. One is focused in a smaller, more manageable piece, while the other is focusing on a full transformation of the school through the lens of global mindedness, and doing so at a very rapid pace. Both great goals, but both goals that are very specific to the institutions. Finally, as someone participating in the pilot, the network of mentor schools and the suggestions from Catharine and JSN colleagues has been immensely helpful. So not only do we have conversations with our mentor and mentee schools, but then our pilot group meets and talks on a separate thread. So that's what I got. I'm interested to take any reflections or questions, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Pete. So we have some time to transition to Q&A, and as we get our three key speakers here up on the spotlight, just a couple reflections. First, it's really a treat to carve out time in the midst of everything else to listen to these three leaders who are in every way leading this conversation on global programming across the network. And again, the names and faces that are on this Zoom call are fully a part of that as well. It strikes me the amount of resources that are available, practical, doable, helpful resources. That's always the intent of the JSN, and this is probably an example of that at its finest. I loved when Catharine said there is no need to recreate the wheel. And then also just the gift of our network and of, as you know, Pete so articulately just said, the idea of building relationships and utilizing the network, making connections across the JSN. This is a terrific example of that. So as we have time here for some Q&A, we can use the chat window. We also would just love if you would chime in with questions here. You know, we intentionally don't use the webinar version of Zoom because we like seeing faces across the screen, right? We like to kind of have the connection in these virtual sessions. So please feel free to chime in here with questions. As you give you a second to kind of process that, I would encourage you to think about, as you listen to Catharine and Salvatore and Pete, where did you feel connection to your work? Where did you feel possibilities and hope? On the other end, where might you have felt more challenge and perhaps more anxiety or fear as we talk about embracing such large but important issues in the day-to-day work of our schools? So I'll give you a second to think about that, and I'll ask them the first question. I'll kick us off. So from the experience of the three of you, having worked across so many different schools, what have you found to be the largest hindrance to embracing these conversations or this work in the school setting? And it might be a good idea to hit that on the head and talk about it a little bit. So just jump in here, if you will.
Do one of you want to go?
Sure, I'll talk. The two words that I wrote down in response to your question was time and silos. So how do we create time for the things that are most important for us? And how do we create time to be in communion with one another? iGEM is a program that allows us to do that. It requires that we take time to be in communion and conversation with one another. The other piece I think that's a real challenge, and everybody who does this work knows this, so maybe I'm beating a dead horse. We've got a ton of really good things going on in all of our schools that are globally minded initiatives. These programs that we're talking about challenge us to say, how do we connect all the initiatives that are happening at the school and across the network so that we can invite students to a more connected experience? So how are they taking their classes, and how does that intertwine with their experiences of service, to their experiences of travel, et cetera, et cetera? How can we take all of these seemingly disparate silos and bring them all together for the connectedness of the students?
I think the response to that question is Ignatian Global Scholars Program in many ways, right? In kind of bringing all that stuff together for kids, 100%. But I agree with you in your identification of those two big hindrances. It's 100% time. I think that like when we're asking other people to kind of buy into this work, I think teachers a lot of times are engaged and would be happy to do this stuff, but the pressures of getting through curriculum and doing all the other things that we have to do can be really difficult to kind of overcome.
I'll continue that theme. From what I hear, it is time silos and school-wide buy-in. I think really that vision emerges that global is universal. Global is not the trip to El Salvador, that's part of it, but acting as a global community with a global mindset. That is something I believe we are doing through the Global Scholars and iGEM. But as that vision grows, I think that is probably an obstacle.
Thank you all. Ed, thank you for raising your hand to add you to the screen here. There we go.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I mean, it is very exciting. I'm at Jesuit School, which is pre-K through 8, and I've had a couple of conversations with Catherine about the possibility of a middle school component. But I just wanted to give you this word of encouragement, and that's this: as a high school veteran of the Kairos Wars, there were many, many arguments about this is not worth our time and we shouldn't leave our silo, and just look at the fruit that Kairos has brought to Jesuit education across the country. So Godspeed.
Thank you. I'd like to add one, because we have some international faces on the call, and one of them is Jimena Castro, who is from Flaxi, our Latin American partners, JSN Latin America. And she is actually one of our mentors. She and I are mentoring a school together. And with this program, then we'll be able to transition and adapt to the needs of Flaxi. So the work that these people are doing is not just unsiloing within schools or within our region, but globally. So I just wanted to make comment of that.
What other questions or insights or feedback do we have for our speakers today? We would love, in the time remaining, to hear from as many folks as we can. Brandon, thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick observation. How do you see this? I see this as being a great opportunity as schools continue diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, some sort of integration with global citizenship. And I think this is a really nice, maybe ongoing accountability as well, because I think if you're committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, you're also committed to global citizenship in many ways, and vice versa. And I just think that some sort of integration, when we say including the decision makers, the guidance counselors, and I think including the diversity, equity, and inclusion staff, or somebody, I guess that would be a decision maker, in that I can see that being really important. And I'm just very grateful for the presentation.
It is one of the categories, as is care of creation. And again, it brings together the silos. But thank you for emphasizing that, Brendan.
Jenny, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a question so much as just a comment to add, if that's all right. I think that I don't know where people on the call are at in terms of whether or not you personally have looked at the global dimensions inventory, but in my experience, that is critical, kind of the critical place to start. So even if your school already filled it out, looking at a copy of that with some of the key people that we've discussed, I think for me was really helpful, because I realized as our global and ecological person, that's my role at our school, I couldn't answer these questions by myself. And then it prompted a conversation with our DEI director, with our Christian service director, with the principal, of who can answer these questions as we begin to get a holistic school and kind of a baseline of where our schools are at. And then that naturally leads into some of these other programs that Catherine mentioned, whether it's, hey, let's look at the Global Scholars Program and what that might look like, and where our course and our curriculum work aligns with some of the things in this inventory. Or maybe in the future, we'd like to participate in the Global Engagement Mentorship Program, where we look at where we are as a school and want to kind of reflect on that, and then begin to make some steps towards moving in a direction that aligns with where we feel like we should be. So that global dimensions inventory is really kind of a powerful tool to begin with.
Thank you, Jenny. A question here from our chat window from Sister Sharon. I hope you're feeling better. Isn't Zoom amazing for that, right? That we can still be a part of this. Interested in tips on getting decision makers on board. I think Jenny kind of just spoke to some of that, but other thoughts about that?
I think that JSN has really helped us out there in making these programs available and kind of putting them into this Ignatian framework and showing that this is a part of who we are as Jesuit schools. And I think that's where the conversation with any of those key decision makers needs to start, is that, I mean, you can't not be for these programs, because these programs are a part of who we are as Jesuit schools. And it just feeds into our Ignatian identity. And so I think they've done a great job of making that really clear, that we can then bring to anyone who we need to at our school if we need to get them on board and get that buy-in. Yeah. Also, shout out to Jenny, who I'm surprised you're not the one talking about Ignatian Global Scholars today. Ignatian Global Scholars rock star there.
I will also say this in response to your question. One of the very last things that we are in the habit of doing at the end of our iGEM conversations is to say, how has this conversation helped you? And what are the next steps based on your reflections today? And in all four of the different conversations that I've had with my two schools, next steps have always been, I need to be in conversation with my principal. I need to be in conversation with the committee that is overseeing the integration of this global work. So those things come up in these iGEM conversations as well.
And lastly, to all of that, as schools have joined in some cases, it has been a president or a principal who has initiated the involvement. And in others, it's been the sustainability person or the DEI person or a teacher that just says, hey, we want to do this. And as the process grows, and we are in pilot, so we are constantly refining and this program, these people that are speaking, there are so many details included that as it becomes evident that there is a process in place, that there are aspects in place, that you're not starting this whole thing from scratch. I think there will be more and more buy-in that will kind of speed up to that tipping point where, as Sal says, this is who we are as Ignatian Jesuit schools.
Alan, thank you.
Yes, hi, everyone. I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. I've had the really good fortune of being involved in the planning of a lot of these processes with Catherine and others that I see on my computer screen, and hello to you all. I wanted to say as a follow-up to one thing that Catherine said about working towards all full school buy-in. That's a challenging thing for me, and I know for others of you as well. And I'm absolutely delighted that there are 3 other people from my school, Cleveland St. Ignatius, here at the meeting. And the more we can all do, and Catherine, this kind of a meeting that it's more expansive to bring in additional people will only help increase the awareness and the progress towards success. So thank you for having this meeting and inviting a wide range of people. Thank you.
Want to be mindful of our time here. We probably do have time for one more comment if there is one. We'll give a pause for just a second.
I have another comment, if that's okay. I think depending on where different schools are at, it's also important to recognize that we all are approaching this from different points. And so I think one thing to be aware of, as Catherine said, is we're not expected to recreate the wheel. There's many of us on this call who have been working in global for a long time and have been putting together some of these programs, but we're here as resources. I would say that, and Catherine has a list of all of us. So reaching out at any point, if there's any question, no question is too big or too small, because we've all been there and we learn from each other. I think that's the thing that I've noticed participating in the iGEM program is there's so many things that we all are doing. And so, as Pete said, it's taking us away from those silos, but helping us really function as a network that has global at its forefront and kind of at its focus, and finding ways to deepen that and make that a part that permeates everything that we do as a school. You know, that's the ultimate vision, but we do that collaboratively. We don't, as Pete said, we're not the experts, right? We all bring something to the table.
Thank you, Jenny. And to kind of support that, each of the programs at the end, you will find a list of the people who helped to create. So, and tomorrow's hemispheres, we delayed it one day so that we could have this and then send hemispheres out tomorrow. We will be highlighting all of these global programs and others. So please make sure you look for that, and please reach out to any of us. This has been a truly collaborative work over years and years, and it shows, in my opinion, in the quality of it.
It really is an example of collaboration at its finest, and it's very obvious that really here in your work, you are modeling exactly what we hope to see in students. And I think that kind of came through very clearly in your presentations and your thoughts, and also in the commentary that we've had. There's so many points of motivation and inspiration to kind of conclude with, but just a few of them here from some of the notes that I wrote down myself. I'm sure you all did this, but just a bit of a synopsis, you know, thinking about building relationships as networking and global work, right? The heart of our work as Ignatian educators, that these programs are a part of who we are as Jesuit schools, and framing it within this context, inviting students to a more connected experience. Those that are committed to diversity and equity and inclusion are also committed to this idea of this broad concept of global citizenship, that we are not expected to recreate the wheel. And I think that, again, was one of the gifts of today. The value of making connections across a network. The idea of transformation as coming through encounter. I mean, I think, again, kind of modeling here in the conversations that we have. So really so much to be grateful for, so much to be impressed by. We've recorded this session. We'll be sharing it, as Catherine said, in tomorrow's edition of Hemisphere, also via our social media platform. And again, thank our communications colleague, Kristin Smith, on the call here for that. But those folks that were not able to join us today, there's never a great time for a session in the middle of the day, but can watch it at your convenience later, the recorded session. So we'd encourage you to share it around to your circles. Many thanks to Catherine and to Pete and to Salvatore, most especially for your time and your energy today. And then thank you to everyone across the network and beyond for joining us. We're grateful for your time. Have a great rest of the day.